5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Wine, Tribe on the other side, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew with us this morning to reflect upon a very, very tough defeat because Michigan clearly left some things on the football field. Lost the game to a good team. I don't want to take anything away from their performance. They deserved it. They, as I've said all week, they outplayed, they outcoached the Wolverines that day. I think Michigan was a better team. All those mistakes, and still lost by a possession. That just feels like one that Michigan let get away. To talk about it, to give their takes on it, to look ahead after it, our good friends from MGoBlog, starting off first with Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Phoenix is just a strip mall.
We have Seth Fisher. Seth, how are you this morning?
I'm not tan, unlike everybody else I know right now.
All right. And then Craig Ross. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I agree with Brian. Phoenix is a strip mall, and in this case, it was a cold and rainy and muddy strip mall because we went down to Sedona to hike, and it was nothing but red mud everywhere. But I like the desert. It's an interesting place, and aside from the game, it was still fun. So.
Yeah, man. Entering the game with so much joy, optimism, and promise. And first series of the game, you're like, deflation, and it just was a series of deflating moments, it seemed, over the course of that game. Brian, kind of take us through your thoughts on the loss.
Well, I mean, you can't really spot a team like TCU with something like 21 points and then expect to win the game, right? And there are sites out there that will evaluate how many points a particular game play was worth. And on 3 separate occasions, Michigan gave up plays in this game that were worth more than a touchdown worth of expectation. That's the 2 pick sixes, the Mullings fumble, and then the 76-yard touchdown on 3rd and 7. And TCU had a hand in those, right? TCU had their part in some of those plays. But, the goal line fumble, that was all Michigan. And then particularly the second pick six where McCarthy has Bell open behind his tight end and doesn't see him. It's just like the thing that really stood out to me is like just how maximally all Michigan State mistakes were punished. So like you'll get games where your quarterback throws an interceptable pass and it clangs off a guy's hands, or a guy ends up making an interception 40 yards downfield and then he's immediately tackled. That was not what happened here. Every time Michigan made a mistake, they didn't get the fumble back. It was a pick six, or it was just whenever something bad happened, the worst possible version of that thing happened. And I think that's not really up to Michigan so much as it's just up to the bloody mindedness of the universe.
Right? Seth?
Yeah, you're allowed to have an incompletion, not an interception, that gets returned for a touchdown. And they had they had a fumble and 2 interceptions as well. But like Brian said, when you look at those calculators, you can see how much the game swings. And it's a huge, huge swing to go from 1st and goal on the 1. And I know that should have been a touchdown. There's no reason to overturn that. But that was already 90% of a touchdown, right? If you're 1st and goal on the 1, you should have your expected points at that point are almost 7. And then you fumble into the end zone and they get the ball on the 20. Their expected points are now 1. So now you have an expected point swing of more than a touchdown. And that's what's happening to Michigan. Anytime a little, you can throw an interception. That happens in games. It sucks. It's a big swing, but it's supposed to be a 4-point swing, not an 8-point swing. And you have enough of those against a team like TCU, you end up with, the remarkable thing is if you take those plays out of this game, the way this looks, because Michigan was actually playing pretty bad, and then they played outstanding. And the fumble and it looks so weird because Michigan came back so quickly at the end of the third. But it was not the game was not really like that. The game was Michigan played badly, then Michigan played better. Michigan probably played well enough to win, but not well enough to win if you have 20 points of swing in it.
Yeah,
right.
It was a very frustrating game. The most frustrating thing to me was how much we shot ourselves in the foot. So yeah, I mean the touchdown to I think it was Wilson that was put on the half-yard line was an abject absurdity. But Michigan then makes it worse by, for some reason, rushing to get on the field to make a play, which I didn't understand at all. I mean, I know I may be a minority. I hate being under center on the goal line. Unless you're going to run a quarterback sneak, I hate being under center because you see these fumbles all the time, especially with teams who aren't generally under center. And the whole thing was just curious to me. Okay, we got a bad call, but it's still 1st and goal at the half-yard line. What are we doing here? And the game had lots of that. It seemed like to me a lot. In the second half, the big play in the game, we're down 41-38. We have a 3rd and 8, I think, or 3rd and 7, and we blitz. We have a safety blitz. It's all out. We're in cover 0 and more blitzes. He almost gets to the quarterback, but doesn't quite. And then the quarterback, and then the cornerback loses leverage on the wide receiver and lets him outside, 70-yard touchdown. And now you're really behind it in a game where all the momentum was going your way, and you have the ball down 3 with plenty of time on the clock. So it just seemed to me like we did it mostly to ourselves. I don't know what to make of this game. It sure was weird. On the one hand, it felt like we didn't play very well on offense, yet we scored 39 points in the second half.
Well, yeah, they didn't play well on offense in the first half for sure.
Yeah,
obviously.
in the first half, we decide JJ doesn't have any legs. In the second half, we decide he does have legs, and all of a sudden, the offense is just cooking. It's just a strange game. I don't get it still. Maybe once I look at the tape, I will.
I felt like, of course, the pick sixes, you pointed those, but watching their two, those two first opportunities from the inside the 2-yard line. You mentioned the hurry up and the fumble, and then the Philly special on the other one. Just a couple of out of care.
I mean, why not run the fumble Ruski?
Yeah,
why not run the play that TCU ran, which Michigan, which they got from Michigan against Ohio State, where the running back just lead blocks for the quarterback, and you run it right in. They walked right in on that one, and that's a really hard play to defend because you end up with a safety on the quarterback, and in the end, your safety has to get to the backfield and bring him down with momentum. It's a very hard play to defend, and you run the Philly special. If you run the Philly special, there's a guy you have to watch. And there's like a whole NFL film on this. You have to check this guy before the play, if you're going to run that play. And that guy was out there. So they didn't have there are some fundamental things that they got wrong in this game that were really frustrating just because they were already very present of mind. If your mind was if you're going to run a fullback dive at the goal line, TCU just failed like that. Why did they lose the Big 12 championship? Because they couldn't get a fullback dive into the end zone. If you're going to play without a safety, gosh, when have we seen that lately? These are themes that are very present of mind right now that Michigan messed up.
Yeah, I guess I don't even have a problem with a fullback dive per se, but the hurry up aspect of it made things unnecessarily difficult. And then the Philly special just was to come out with an ISO of all plays, right? Because that was the thing that our guys were saying on film. It's very, very tough to run up the middle on these guys. But they come out with an ISO and then get in the red zone and run the Philly special. You come out on the next series and you run the fullback dive, but you do the hurry up before. It's just the coherence of some of the things didn't quite add up in the first half. They found it, Brian. They, again, attacking the edges, that became a real thing. Hitting them with counters and involving JJ in the run game. Those things started to pick up toward the tail end of the first half and picked up steam in a big way in the second half. Play action off of it. It just took them to halftime to start doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I write these previews expecting that, the coaches are also watching the opposition, and I was just baffled at, because I expect that they're gonna put a lot of stuff out there that they haven't put out before, and they're not just gonna run into the teeth of this defense that is set up to defend inside zone, and that's what they do for a half. And JJ's first carry is it's deep into the third quarter. 3/4 of this game are almost gone before you use your quarterback's legs as a weapon, and it's just incredibly frustrating because what what are you saving JJ McCarthy for at this point? We know that when we run JJ McCarthy, he's very productive, and he also opens up everything else in the rush offense. And this is not the time where it's well, what if JJ McCarthy gets hit? That's for Maryland. That's for Rutgers. It's not for a playoff game. So I was just extremely frustrated. And then as soon as they start doing it, it's oh yeah, that works.
Right. Yeah. Man.
That's a pretty good play. And it opens up other stuff for your offense. And then I think the other thing is that TCU, at some point, they're getting beat so bad deep that you expect them to back off, and they just never do.
Right.
And so I think there's a tendency. I mean, they should have run that flea flicker back to back. They should have kept running the flea flicker until it didn't work, because they were so dedicated to getting downhill against Michigan's run game that, yeah, they'd hit the big plays and then they'd score touchdowns, and then they'd be all right, well, now we got to do something else. They didn't have to do something else. They could have just kept doing it. And I kind of understand why you would assume that someone would back off. TCU does not care. But I mean, if you're looking at it overall on the offense, they scored, what was it, 45 points, and they gave away a touchdown on the 1 yard line. That's not bad. I mean, they did have 18 drives, so you got to think about that. So
they gave away 2 touchdowns. They gave away 2 touchdowns. Man.
Well, 4th and 2 is not exactly 1st and goal from the 1, so that was a little bit dodgier, I guess. But I mean, when they gave up those touchdowns, they had opportunities to have the opposition start at their 1 or 2 yard line, and they didn't have that happen either. Yeah. That's a major factor in why you go for it in those situations, is because the ensuing drive is usually burning a couple of downs, and then you're in 3rd and 7. So, yeah, it's just,
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. That was another reason why I didn't like that. I'm not opposed to trick plays, but I want my quarterback handling the ball in that situation. And Colston Loveland, first, Colston was hung out to dry because your running back goes the complete wrong way on the play, leaves the end to blow up field and blow up the play. I don't know that it would have scored if the running back goes the right way on that play, but certainly Colston would have had more of an opportunity. But man, to your point, Brian, I mean, you want to chuck it up in the end zone or something at that point. Even if it's incomplete, they get the ball at the 2 yard line, and the complexion of that next series for you defensively looks somewhat different.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a combination of frustrating things that I think the coaching staff did, frustrating things that the players did, and then just a lot of bottom of the barrel variance for Michigan in this one. So it's extremely frustrating. I don't think it really says a whole lot. There are people after the 2 semifinals who are this is a referendum on the Big Ten. No, it's not. you lost by the tiniest margins in these crazy games against good teams. It's that's not anything. So, I mean,
yeah, that's a tough. That's the thing as I look at this game, and it sounds like you guys are the same way. All losses are tough to take. This was in this tougher because if Michigan plays a game half as sloppy as this is the sloppiest game of the year, if they make 1 or 2 fewer mistakes and a cacophony of mistakes, they win this game. They're a better football team than TCU, but TCU was a better football team that day.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about these little plays, right? Like there are a lot of things that are coming out as I watch the film. Like, oh man, Upshaw did not have his best game, right? But those are like plays that are like 0.3 points that swing, where there's these huge swings that I just like. It's hard to even focus on the little minutia of the game because the big things just change the game so dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what you thought about us defensively in this one. So, I mean, it felt like the linebackers were catching blockers over and over. And was that something structural problem with our linebackers? I mean, what did you see there?
The linebackers have been the linebackers all year. They're not big guys, so the line is supposed to protect them. And it was weird. I didn't see as much Mason Graham this game. He was in there more than but like I wonder why they kind of went away from him a little bit, because he's been better at Jenkins actually at protecting the linebacker. So when that's a problem, you kind of want that guy in there.
I mean, there was some baffling.
yeah.
They had Cam Good in there in the third quarter.
Yeah, they had Good in more than Mason Graham.
And I was like, he hasn't played all year. Like, what are we doing here? And then they get gashed for 15 yards pretty much immediately, and Good leaves the field. And I'm like, what was that?
50 yards. 50 yards.
Well,
They did a mosh rush, and like and Good can't get to the quarterback. He gets out of his lane. And,
well, then there's a 15-yard run right after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we haven't even discussed the Jamon Green corner blitz where nobody else thought a corner blitz was on in terms of just like huge mistakes. I mean, I was watching that. They tip a blitz and they're checking, and someone didn't get the check. I don't know if it was Green or the safety or whatever, but yeah, you go into this game and you just, you have this huge team-wide mental implosion, and it's really hard to like deal with, like in terms of like analysis. It's like, well, don't do any of that ever.
Right. I mean, the worst you could possibly play. That's the thing. It's like, oh my God. I mean, every kind of mistake you can make in this game they made.
It's like you walked into the bathroom and your kid pooped on the floor, and you're like, well, what are the coaching points here? There's no coaching points. There's just cleanup.
I mean, you're right, Brian. On that play with the Jamon Green blitz, if Green keeps looking back over his shoulder, he keeps looking back to make sure that the safety has come behind him to check the wide receiver, and the safety meanwhile keeps moving away from him towards.
He's rolling up to cover one. He's doing. He's running into something, running a completely different play.
And Green keeps looking like what, and then he blitzes, and then it's a touchdown or whatever it was. A big.
It was like 60 yards or whatever.
Yeah. Ironically, that wasn't even one of the bigger swing of plays. Like when I looked at the list of plays, that didn't even make the top 10 of what a game of plays that swung this game. But tipping their blitzes was a problem all game, and they never changed the timing on that. Every single they'd line up, TCU would make they'd give away their blitzes every single time. So they were having a hard time getting pressure, even though they were bringing more guys than they brought pretty much all year, because they get caught, right? And they know, everyone knows exactly where everyone's coming from. They didn't change things up. If TCU paused and said, okay, we need to change things, then Michigan would make a call. But their blitzes were so ineffective because they kept on tipping them. And that timing is supposed to improve as the game goes on, and they didn't change it at all.
Oh, and we haven't even talked about Mozzie Smith getting a free run at Max Duggan and then just freezing. Topic.
Yeah. And Junior Colson at the beginning of the game too.
It was like a team-wide complete meltdown. And it's like, what do you do with that? What do you like? How are you supposed to like analyze anything ever?
Yeah.
When it's just like,
I think what you're hitting at is it was a total team loss. I mean, you can't put it all on player mistakes. You can't put it all on coaching strategy. It was equal parts of both. In my opinion, the offensive strategy in the first half, the defensive strategy in the second half, the mistakes on the field throughout, and yet this is why you keep coming back to, and yet they still lost by a touchdown. It's like you make all those mistakes.
Yeah.
You lose by a touchdown. Man, you're a better team than that. That's why it is so tough to sit here and look at that team going to the national championship game. The only thing that gave me some semblance of comfort is that Ohio State's not going to win a national championship. Because if Ohio State had pulled that out, Ohio State would be winning the national championship this year. And it's just something not right about that. Fortunately, the football guys aren't that mean.
Yeah, man, you put Lathan Ransom up against that passing game. I don't know about.
Well, those dudes aren't covering anybody either. I mean, they were getting run by left and right. They couldn't cover Michigan. Oh my God! Don't even get me started.
Well, it was a save. Like their outside corners, Michigan did a pretty good job of avoiding them, and then the pick six is like some guy named Bud Clark. Like, guy named Bud Clark shouldn't be able to intercept anything. He should be running a Radio Shack. How are we getting beaten by Bud Clark?
Yeah, the first interception he was late. The second interception he just
threw it to the wrong guy.
Yeah, he just did. He locked onto a guy.
But you're allowed to throw interceptions that don't turn into pick sixes.
Well, I mean that's
like
like Michigan got a pick six from. Not a pick six, a pick from Rod Moore, and that was a great play, big swing play. Michigan gets it at the 50, and you go and look in the EPA stuff, and it's 2.9 instead of 8.
Right.
8.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to talk about the rest of minutia. I mean, we have to give some credit too. You don't lose a game like this that you're playing so terribly in the first half, making all these mistakes, and actually have a chance to come back and win at the end without actually doing some incredible things. J.J. McCarthy in the second half looked like a playoff winning quarterback.
Except for the mistake.
Okay, being allowed to have like one mistake.
No,
it's not supposed to be maximally punished.
I mean, he's a true sophomore. And so you go back and you think about the things that Michigan was doing this year. And they have this ground game that's very punishing and all that stuff. But, do we feel that like maybe they leaned into that too much? And there were opportunities for Michigan to get JJ the ball in situations where he might have thrown this pick six against a different team. And it wouldn't have mattered against that team. But like in terms of just like live fire reps, Blake Corum got a lot. Blake Corum didn't get to this game. JJ McCarthy may not have gotten enough. And then when you go back to the quarterback run game, it's like, who are you? Like, what are you? Are you a quarterback run team? And Michigan kind of was in certain games, but in terms of just like, is this part of our identity? I think you have to say the answer was no, and I think that was a pretty big waste once you got to the big stage, because you took 3 quarters before you actually put the ball in his hands on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're pointing out is we've talked about all the player errors that we saw on the field. The coaching miscalculation for them was twofold. I think they came into this game thinking we could bully these guys. We could bully their down 3. We can run it up the middle on this team, and they get the ISO out the gate. Yeah. And I think that sort of reinforces that notion. And TCU was able to show them, no, you can't. No, you can't. You aren't gonna run on us like that. Now you can run on us, and Michigan eventually did, attacking the edges. And this is the other miscalculation. Second best running back on this team, when Blake Corum is out, is J.J. McCarthy.
Right.
Yeah. He's your second best running back. And it took him too long to get to that.
Yeah, and I don't know how you watch that Penn State game and you don't come away thinking like this needs to be a major feature of our first half. Because they got so discombobulated that in that Penn State game because McCarthy had a couple runs that were looking like they would break big, and it just totally changed what Penn State was able to do on defense. And so to me, even if McCarthy gets a couple runs in the first quarter that don't really go anywhere, that just changes the profile of what you can do, what TCU can do. And I just went into this assuming that it was a big game and they were going to bring them out, and then that the texture of this game was going to be different, and they did not.
So there's, to that point, in the Penn State game, Michigan had a lot of things early that then Penn State reacted to, right? And then they challenge and they beat Penn State on the reaction. There are a couple things in here that I think I've noticed, and I'm going to I have to get the film view out before I can really talk about this on radio. But I think Michigan might have been setting some things up, and then they couldn't use it because they get to the end of the game and it's like, well, first of all, they were scoring quickly when they did score, so like they had very few plays on their drives, and then also, you're down 21 points, or you're down, you have to throw the ball, and as soon as they started throwing the ball, McCarthy was actually pretty on too. So you get the flea flicker, and it's like, okay, well, what was the next play if that didn't work, right? Like there were a lot of things that they probably had prepared.
Another flea flicker.
So there you go. Once that's working, like you maybe kind of go away from some of the things you were setting up, because at that point, no one's like, oh, what happened to us in their first quarter? It's like,
I mean,
I
don't know.
Got off the rails.
I feel like it's early in the game. You got to establish JJ's legs, because then, we've seen it. We saw it in the Ohio State game. They established JJ's legs in the second half, and what happened on those 2 long runs? Well, there were guys dedicated to JJ McCarthy, and there were mistakes made because people were worried that McCarthy was going to keep the ball. And you didn't do any of that until the third quarter of this game, and I just don't understand. And I think that's something that you need to really have if you're looking at ways in which the coaching staff needs to have like a hard look at what they were doing this year and what ended up not being quite good enough. I think, the excessive conservatism with McCarthy over the course of the year leads to situations where maybe he doesn't have enough experience doing various things to lead you to a victory in this kind of game. Now, he did a lot of great things. He certainly showed a ton of promise. He was, fast when asked to keep the ball, and he was on point downfield, but some big mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that if you had to do over again, they would. Just Jim admitted after the game about that the Philly specialist say, "Hey, put that on me." Said you do something different. I think they run JJ out the gate. I think they attack the edges more. They run JJ out the gate. It's a different ball game if you're able to control the game running the football. It's a Big 12 game by the time they get to it, right? You got to come from high. You're still running the football, but hey, man, it's going to be back and forth. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be the kind of game they want to play. Whereas if you start out the game, you establish the run, you oppose your way. Maybe down the line, maybe you can run it up the middle after you've worn them out a little bit, right? But it's not that kind of game because of the way they started out. They still had a great chance, and I definitely got to give JJ, give the offense a lot of credit for the resiliency. They kept bouncing back under extreme circumstances, but now you got to stop the other squad, and that got increasingly hard to do. To your point, Seth. Whether it's they're tipping their blitzes or not getting home, not making a tackle in the open field, whatever the case may be. My biggest issue with them in this game was they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the run.
No, that was, I think my predictions about how Michigan's ground game was going to go was more about like the coaches not taking advantage of JJ's legs, but I was just baffled by I watched them. I was like, this is what it would look like if Minnesota was playing in the Big 12. That turned out to be fairly accurate.
Yeah.
They moved some people, and it was, I don't think Mike Morris was anywhere close to 100%, because Mike Morris was not getting Mike Morris's 100% snaps. There were way too many snaps where he's out of the game and guys who are not at his level were playing, and he didn't have any impact in this game. So I think, all that talk from practice was probably just snowing people, and that he was significantly hampered in this game because he really did not have much impact.
The grass kind of changed things a little bit too, and Michigan unfortunately couldn't take advantages because they couldn't just get their guys on them. But when an offensive player in this game actually hit a defensive player, that guy just moved because no one could get any purchase. No one could anchor in and you can watch. There's a couple plays where Morris gets his feet below him, he's anchored in, and then he's just sliding down. He's like a sled. And I don't know if you guys said it was a little rainy there. I wasn't at the game, but
not on that field, Seth. It was rainy but I think the field was dry.
The well,
It's covered.
The roof was
the
closed.
roof was closed.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was. It looked. I mean, there were people slipping all over the place. Like it looked like a more slippery field. I mean, it was just
It's
like
a
the
completely
grass.
bizarre
Yeah.
situation because it's like they have this field that sits outside the stadium, and then they like poured it in
Truck
for
it in.
games.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, have you guys heard of field turf? It's pretty good. Like, what is the reason for this? And people are slipping all over the place. And there were a couple people on Twitter who were remarking that this is like a pretty constant thing at the Fiesta Bowl. Is that the last time they had a playoff semi there, it was just a disaster because people couldn't get any grip. So
I mean, what's the point of that exactly? Does anyone know what the point of having? I mean, is
I know the
it?
players prefer natural grass.
They do. Okay.
Players
It's
prefer
maybe
natural grass. There's actually
safer.
a
I
big
don't
thing.
know.
There was a big thing about it from one of the teams this year. They were talking about, hey, you know, we this league is so rich. Why isn't there, you know, natural grass across the NFL? I'm like you, Brian. I was like, man, field turf seems like a revelation to the sport, right?
Yeah.
AstroTurf was when it was really bad, but
Yeah.
I would be interested to know if there is a tangible difference in injury rates on natural grass versus field turf. But the players seem to think there is, at least based on some of the comments that I've read. So, you know,
I mean, old Michigan guys talk about it because like they used to use the dirt to like, you know, like I get out there and I rub my hands with it and then I feel like I'm playing football. Like they have those kinds of feelings, but
well,
you know,
yeah,
the
but
field turf works.
by the time they installed the field turf at Michigan Stadium, they'd tried grass there for about a decade, and it was a fiasco.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like,
all right. So I'm gonna give you guys some chance to collect yourselves because we got to talk Harbaugh rumors, right? People are asking in the
do
comments.
we?
We do. It is our duty to talk about.
Can you just put on like a
Harbaugh
recording
rumors.
of last year's version of this, and we'll say the same stuff?
So I will get you guys. I'll get your take on the latest with those rumors, where you think things will go with Michigan's head man on the other side. Stay tuned for that here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
Says, did TC5 manhandle our line? I think the 3-3-5 definitely gave Michigan problems. There were so many run-throughs in this game. There were times where it wasn't necessarily getting manhandled if you aren't even touching a guy. Like not knowing who to block was an issue.
It felt like they had a free hitter a lot.
They did.
And I don't know if that
They were
was
just charging downhill on everything. Like,
right, which seems like you beat that with, I don't know, play action, flea flickers.
I mean, when they did do that, that stuff was absolutely wide open, and then they, you know, every time they went back to it, it was just like, we're not changing what we're doing. And I was like, okay. But yeah, if you just get someone checking JJ, then it's a different situation because then one mistake, that's 6.
Yeah, that's right. And in the second half, Michigan did have those big plays because I don't think TCU changed.
Well, think about what TCU is designed to stop. They're created for those Big 12 offenses that they run air raids and then they run inside zone, and that's how you. I mean that is the way to defeat inside zone because you're looking to get your guys released, get them downfield, get them to the linebacker level, and they get to the linebacker level and no one's there because everybody's already flung past them. If they ever got a block, that block went great. It was getting their guys hooked on to, it was making those connections in the first place, and that's what TCU is built to do.
Yeah.
Someone
said I got to go back to say that Michigan needs to find a backup for Donovan Edwards. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. 100%. That showed up in this game. Big
Maybe
time.
they can get that Blake Corum guy to come back.
Hey, look, it's this way. It's more possible than I initially thought. Like he is seriously contemplating coming back. I think
Would you take Blake Corum or Jim Harbaugh?
I don't think that's a choice you even have to.
Yeah.
You may not even have to make a choice there. You may get them both.
Yeah.
Back on radio in about 30 seconds.
But Blake, I think is really seriously measuring his draft stock. The thing about it is, I just don't know that he can. I don't know that it'll suffer.
He's going to be
that much.
any better. I mean, he can run for 2,500 yards next year, and he's going to be the same Blake Corum that he was
and I
this
don't know that
past
his
which is
stock.
damn good.
Yeah, I don't know that his stock suffered much from
Mhm.
missing the last couple of games. Like, is he going to go from being a 3rd round pick to?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the
My
calculation,
guys,
is
stand
like,
by.
if he's going to be a 3rd round pick next year or a 3rd round pick this year, maybe he wants to stay at Michigan, get paid as much as he would.
Back on
possibly
radio
more.
in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider. We were talking in the break real quick with the MGoBlog Roundtable. Brian, I want to give you a chance to finish your thought. We were talking about Blake Corum and the possibility of him coming back. And I had commented during the break that I just don't know that his stock was harmed much by missing the final couple of games. And I don't know that it can improve that much by, whatever he does next season. And you were responding to that, Brian.
Well, no, I agree with that. I think that his draft stock is probably what it is and what it will be. And so for Corum in the NIL era, is that it's possible that Michigan could come up with a package that is better than what a 3rd or 4th round NFL rookie is going to make, which is around $850K. And then, yeah, he delays getting to that second contract a year. But to me, that's maybe not that big of a sacrifice because if he's getting the NIL at Michigan, then the financial gap there is significantly smaller. It's about, the guarantee you get in years 2 and 3 or whatever. But I feel like the logical thing, if all you care about is maximizing your earnings, is to go to the NFL. But it's close enough now that it feels like if a guy just likes college, likes his team, likes the idea of coming back with JJ McCarthy and Donovan Edwards and having a real good team next year, then I think it's feasible that he would return. And I think
I mean, and he's not a pure dollar and cents guy. Corum, he on we know that some of his NIL money has been given away, a chunk of it, and so he's not going to be looking strictly at dollars and cents. I think Sam said something earlier this morning about, or maybe it was Ira, about if you're winning the Powerball, maybe you're not showing up tomorrow. And I'm thinking, if I'm winning the Powerball, I probably am. And, and so people just have different mindsets about these things.
So what does the NFL stand for? Not for long, right? And that's always been the thing of the NFL is once you get there, your focus has to be on getting that guaranteed money. And these guys are smart now and they get good advice nowadays. So they understand the finances of the NFL.
Right.
I think college football, now that you can actually use NIL to, get in that market, is they have an opportunity to provide something the NFL does not provide, which is security. Michigan has a use for Blake Corum all the way down the line. People are going to want to meet Blake Corum. People are going to want to have Blake Corum around. They can say to him, look, it's not just up front. They're not just talking about $850 or whatever it takes, right? It could be, look, you come around for one more year, you graduate from here, you do 4 years here. Anyone who does 4 years here, it has an opportunity to go to the NFL and didn't. It's going to have some sort of security from Michigan, no matter what happens to you in the NFL. And we can provide those opportunities because your value to Michigan is already established. Blake Corum's name is going to be remembered here, and it might not be wherever he goes in the NFL.
Yeah. Let's get to the Harbaugh talk, guys. That is definitely a prevailing theme in the comments here. Yesterday, was it yesterday the report out of Charlotte, Ira, where the owner from
late Tuesday night.
Yeah, late Tuesday night owner from Carolina Panthers reportedly had a conversation with Jim. There was a quote in the Queen City, whatever you call that paper, where he said, I think I'll be the coach of Michigan next year. No man knows the future, something along those lines. I'm curious what you guys think, what you think the future holds for Jim Harbaugh. And I'll start in reverse order. Start with you, Craig.
Well, a number of years ago, I went to Omaha and talked to Warren Buffett. So what? Warren Buffett wasn't hiring me unless he was looking for a driver or something like that. So just talking to someone doesn't mean much. I believe Harbaugh will be back next year. He told us he'll be back next year. I doubt if any of this noise is coming from Harbaugh or even people around Harbaugh. My guess is this noise is coming from the NFL because it's in their interests. And so I don't know. Harbaugh's most recent comment, saying who knows, basically. But yeah, I guess there could be Godfather offers that might be appealing to him. But I think Harbaugh's back at Michigan next year. That's what he told us. And I don't think there's any reason to believe anything else.
Craig, Seth.
I mean, if Harbaugh was not interested in the NFL offers, he would have shut them down. He would not have said, he would not be saying what he's saying. He would have said, no, I'm coming back to Michigan next year unless someone gives me a piece of the team or so. You don't have to say it in those words, but there are ways to shut down those rumors that he hasn't shut down. So obviously, he's still interested in going to the NFL. Is he interested in going to the NFL this year? Would it take an incredible offer? Is the NFL going to give him those kinds of offers? The ridiculous numbers coming out of Denver right now, we're like, oh, we would offer, $25 million a year to Sean Payton, and we'd offer $20 million a year to Jim Harbaugh. That is just insanity to me, right? Like, or the guy who said, oh, Jim Harbaugh is not interested in Denver because he doesn't want the competition because that division's too hard. Jim Harbaugh said something to you about the competition level's too hard. Okay, I believe that, right? So, like, some of the NFL reporting on this is just completely out of whack. Now, if someone does offer $25 million a year, no college football team is going to offer that. And I think Jim does have to think about eventually the fact that NIL changes the market, because you're now in the same market as your players for that same money. It comes from the donors. It's going to go into collectives, and then the collectives go to pay out NIL. And that is now coming from the same people going to the same people. So if you want to get your contract in college football as a coach, you should do it now.
What is Jim Harbaugh going to do with more money?
Yeah,
He's going to buy more khakis. Jim Harbaugh doesn't really
set
care
up
about
9
that.
kids for life. I don't know.
He's
Like,
already
got that.
He's already got that. Like, the money doesn't. If Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL, it's not going to be because of money.
no, it's because
wants
someone
to-
gave him that kind of
wants-
control.
He wants to win the Super Bowl, and that's what he wants to do. The problem is that the current jobs that are open are the Colts,
Stinks.
which were run by Jim Irsay, who
Mhm.
people say made a quarterback change this year. Denver, who's saddled to Russell Wilson and has no draft picks for the foreseeable future, and then Carolina, which is actually a reasonable opportunity. So, I feel like we'll know in the near future. And I mean, at some point, if you're Ward Manuel, you got to be like, you told me this wasn't going to happen every year. I don't know what his leverage is here, because you're not going to fire Jim Harbaugh, but this recruiting class that Michigan just brought in does not correspond to a recruiting class you'd expect from a college football playoff team. And I think Harbaugh flirting with the NFL has a lot to do with that. And I think if it happens again, well, then we're going to be stuck on this treadmill, and we're not going to be at this championship level for very much longer.
So I think when you parse his comment, which it's easy to see that he's not closing the door on his dream. I think you stated correctly, Brian, that he has a dream of winning the Super Bowl, just like he has a dream of winning the national championship. I don't think he's, to Craig's point, I don't think that he's the one chasing it, though. I don't think that he's the one putting this out there. I disagree with the notion that there are sources that are saying Jim Harbaugh is out of here. The minute in NFL, I don't think anyone around him in his orbit, and certainly not him directly, are out there saying that. But if a team came to him and made him an unbelievable offer, Do I think that there's a very good chance that he would take it? Yeah, and I'm not even one that thinks that he would shy away from. Think about every team that he's taken over was a team that was in need of, from San Diego to Stanford to San Francisco to Michigan. All of them were teams that needed to be rebuilt, and he did so in each instance quickly. Right, so I just don't think that kind of thing turns him off. But I think he is so happy with the state of the program. He may want to see some different things happen with the pacing of NIL, right? But I think he's so happy with the way things are now that it would take a monster opportunity in terms of offer, control, who's he working with. I think it would take an unbelievable combination of things to get him to go. Now, are teams more willing to offer that combination this year? Sure, but I think short of that, he's going to be the coach at Michigan next year, which is why I think it's overwhelmingly likely that that's exactly what will happen, that he'll be Michigan's coach next season.
So make it make sense to me. Why is somebody telling Bruce Feldman? Why is Bruce Feldman, who's somebody who's not a joke, right? Why is he reporting somebody's telling him Harbaugh would leave at the drop of a hat?
I don't know.
Harbaugh has an agent now. That's it. That's who it is. It's the agent. Because nobody else would say that.
Right. Okay. I look, I'm not questioning his credibility. I guess we got to question what constitutes a source close. Right? So are we talking about like his circle?
No, we're talking about his agent, because literally no one else would say that about Jim Harbaugh.
Right.
Because nobody else who knows Jim Harbaugh would be like, I have a prediction to what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. Right?
That's a really good point.
No, I mean,
That's a really good point.
Nobody except an agent would have the hubris to predict anything Jim Harbaugh would do. So, yeah, it's the agent, and I don't really lend that any credence. I understand that someone told Bruce Feldman this, and I understand that he reported it. I think it's bad judgment for him to report it, because it's clearly a guy with a vested interest in having this out there. And I can't think of anybody else who it could possibly be.
Yeah, definitely not anyone in his immediate circle. I agree with that. I can tell you this with extreme confidence. Extreme. I can't have a stronger gut feeling at all when I say it's not Jim Harbaugh putting it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that unequivocally, that it's not him putting it out there. So now I'm also not going to sit here and guarantee. I can't guarantee you that he's going to be the coach next year if he can't guarantee it, right? But I can say that I think it is extremely likely. I think he's being sincere when he talks about, hey, man, I'm happier than I've ever been here. I think that is legit.
Is it hurting recruiting? That's the question. Because, like, we just had a class that was 18th when Michigan should have been, like, top 5.
It
when you
has
look
the
at the
potential
results.
to. No, it doesn't have the potential to. Yeah, I think while I don't think he owes Michigan being here in perpetuity, he does owe, the timeliness of the window being open. So there does have to be, attention given to that. You got to be mindful of that. And does it impact the bottom line of your recruiting class?
You got to go like Beeline went, where one day Watch just shows up on Twitter and says he's gone. And nobody heard anything about it before that. That's the way it's got to go. You got to stop doing this stuff that looks bad publicly. Not that he cares.
Or if this is the standard now, right? That every year, as soon as the season's over, every year we're going to go through this, right? Maybe not having interview with the Vikings, but every year the NFL is going to say things, and then Harbaugh's not going to turn it down, and you're going to have your agent out there. There's got to be a plan in place. I don't know if it's, if tab Sharon Moore now and say, look, in 5 years this guy's going to be the head coach, but like have some. If like Brian's right, if you're going to have a way out. If you're not just going to walk out the door in the last second, this is what's got to be. You got to have a future in place.
We got to go, folks. It's been another great MGoBlog Roundtable. We will be back next week talking much more basketball because we have Michigan State to talk about and that kind of thing. So looking forward to that. Until then, thanks for watching another MGoBlog Roundtable, and thanks for listening to the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK.